Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 35 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and in this episode, we are going to be talking about lessons learned from the line. So we just finished up our 2019 shooting season and shooting schools, and I think it'd be a great opportunity to sit back and talk about all the little things that we see through the school, some of the ways that we try to correct them and to help the shooters get the most out of their shooting, and just pass along some really great tips. So as you get out there, get working and get shooting, we can help you get the most of your time on the line and out of your equipment. So without further ado, here we go. So our 2019 shooting school season has come to an end, and I think this is a great opportunity for the podcast to sit and talk about some of the things that we've seen on the line and some great things that we can pass along to you, the shooters out there. So I'm very fortunate that I get to spend time on the line doing something that I'm really passionate about, and that is, sort of sharing long-range shooting and marksmanship and all of these things that are, ingrained in me as far as something that I just absolutely enjoy doing and really, really do enjoy sharing to everybody else out there. The benefit to me, from a background of shooting is I'm in a position to where I get to watch thousands and thousands of rounds go down range, and I get to see cause and effect. I'm watching what the shooters are doing, and I'm watching what the round's doing, and then I get to make some adjustments and then see the improvements that happens to the shooter. What that means is I get to learn, oftentimes at these schools, as much, if not more, than the students do. And that happens through the course of the entire year. So each year I'm blessed that I get to watch all of this and learn and grow. But because we have the advantage of watching you shoot and watching the effects of what's happening, where most shooters, when they're training, they can't watch themselves shoot. Or, they don't have a selfie stick yet to where people are recording themselves shooting and going back and looking at it and reevaluating it and then shooting again. And so we've been very blessed to be in a situation that, not only do we get to pass along great information and help shooters just really shoot to their fullest abilities, but we also learn and learn a lot. I always say that you can learn as much watching and teaching and showing as you can actually pulling the trigger sometime. And so I want to take time in this podcast and go over a lot of the things that we've seen in 2019 that would benefit you as a shooter. Things that were different, things that popped up that were really big deals hurting the shooter himself or herself. And then within a couple minutes, you change a couple things up and it's just off to the races. It's really fascinating to watch. So we're going to go over just a list of things that we've seen at the school this year to try to pass along and just give you some food for thought. So right out of the gate, there's lots of things that get involved with the bipods. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about that. For example, there's lots of great bipods coming on the market right now. So you see like the Atlas, the new CAL version, which allows you to cant but doesn't pan and has a little bit wider footprint. I like that particular bipod a lot, especially when you lock it up on a Picatinny rail. But there's a lot of knockoff bipods out there that are imitating a lot of the more famous bipods. They are still a problem here at the school. The feet are loose. They won't tighten up to the gun properly. The feet are rolling. So if you get like a bench rest version where you can't get the feet locked, so the feet themselves don't spin or turn, that causes some problems. So, just the quality of the bipod itself attached to the rifle. Also, being aware where the bipod is at during shooting. And we see this a lot here at the school. So they make a lot of different shooting mats now. Some of them are actually rather thick, and some of them are pretty stiff when you lay them flat. And what happens is, we don't like to see the feet on the mat. And so you'll hear me say at the school that we want you to set those feet forward of the mat on hard, solid surface of some kind. The problem with a lot of the mats nowadays is that they are soft and that they're almost, second to the Serta Perfect Sleeper. Some of them are so thick and spongy, and you're not doing yourselves any favors by getting your feet on the mat itself and allowing that to influence the shot. The feet just aren't on solid ground. But there's another danger that gets involved in that, and that the feet, as you're shooting, start to constantly reset, moving rearward. So they're getting closer to the very front or leading edge of the mat. And some of these mats, when they're laid out flat, are pretty stiff. They're not soft. And so what will happen as the shooters are shooting, all of a sudden they'll start to get some really crazy rounds going down range. And you can look over, and what had happened is their feet will come back and get in contact with the actual leading edge of the mat, jamming it up. So under recoil, you've got the recoil on your shoulder, but then you've also got the feet themselves getting hung up on the front of the mat, causing the rifle to do all kinds of funny stuff. And then when you get into like an Atlas that allows you to pan, compound that even further when one leg gets on the mat or to the face or the leading edge of the mat and the other doesn't. So the feet have twisted because the bipod itself can pan left and right. And so they're not square to the rifle itself. One foot is rearward, one foot is forward ever so slightly, and you'll get one of those feet up against the leading edge of the mat, which jams it up, and then under recoil, it does all kinds of funny stuff. So just be mindful of where you put your feet. Make sure you stay with a really quality bipod, and make sure your feet stay on something solid on the ground. Now, that brings me into the subject of the actual shooting mats themselves, and this causes some problems here at the school. We can get it ironed out quickly, but we see it all the time, is that there's a lot of rifle carrying bags that fold out in the shooting mats. And I get it. You don't want to lay in mud and on the ground all the time. And it does insulate you a little bit from the ground. But the mats that we use are actually really thin. I believe they're sold at Mile High Shooting. I think they're Tab Gear. But they're just a very thin waterproof material that allows the rear bag of the rifle to set firmly on the ground itself. So the mats themselves can cause an issue not only with the bipod itself, but also if you have a foam or a thicker mat for comfort, then all of a sudden you've got your rear bag that is sort of floating on this mat. It's not on a really hard, solid surface, and it's sort of like shooting off of a mattress. So I like paper thin mats, something that's just going to keep me, off the ground and out of the mud. That's about all I think it should be. And anything more than that, when you set your rear bag on there, that can cause some problems at that as well. Now, follow through. Let's talk about that for a minute. This becomes an issue here at the school. Follow through sort of goes hand in hand with letting the rifle, and if you go back and listen to our other podcast, we talk a lot about fundamentals. We did several podcasts breaking each part down a little bit, trying to make the fundamentals make sense. But follow through becomes really a big deal for shooters because they end up getting this inconsistent loading pressure on the rear of the rifle. So something that we'll see often is someone will be set up on the firing line, they'll be shooting and doing pretty well. And then all of a sudden they'll crack a round off and you'll watch the feet of the bipod slide back quickly 2 to 3 inches before it starts to get resistance on the shooter and his shoulder. And so inconsistent pressure on the rear of the rifle, whether they're loading their bipod or pulling the rifle into the shoulder 2 to 3 pounds or the combination of the two. But I'm going to stress right here that you've got to have a really consistent amount of pressure built up on the rear of the rifle, especially in the recoil pad area. The reason being is if you are inconsistent in that, from shot to shot, the rifle moves differently. So in other words, what probably was happening with the shooter that had this lunge before the rifle, hit the shoulder. In other words, you watch the feet slide back quickly, and then the rifle settles into the shoulder and controls the recoil. But what's happening is he's not having a really good amount or consistent pressure built up from shot to shot. So you might have pressure on the rear of the rifle for several shots. And then out of the blue, he backed that off a little bit. Although he could feel the rifle touching, he didn't have any pressure. So under recoil, now the rifle gets to launch into your shoulder and move quickly rearward, and it affects your point of impact. So that's that random flyer. It's something as a shooter, you sometimes don't recognize it's happening right away, but keeping really good, consistent pressure on the rear of the rifle, whether you're pushing or pulling, it's got to be consistent. You want that rifle to move to the rear in the same pattern each and every single time. You don't want one time it touching the shoulder, one time it not, one time it touching the shoulder, one time it not. Hunters get in trouble with this because they wear a very thick coat in the winter when they're hunting, and they probably practiced in a t-shirt or maybe a flannel. And so they feel that rifle on the coat, but they actually don't have it, pressure built up into the shoulder. And so you've got this thickness of the coat that compresses before the rifle bumps the shoulder. So that can cause some small areas. And we're nitpicking here, but it's just common stuff that we see. The other thing I would like to bring up is trigger control. We talk about this a lot at the class, but what happens to shooters when they're on the firing line is they get so intent on watching what's happening in front of their eyes, looking at the target through the optics, that they sort of fall asleep at the wheel fundamentally with how they're interacting with the rifle. And so a couple of things can happen with trigger control. Number one is they'll do this weird ramp up where their finger will come slightly off the trigger, like resetting an AR type thing, and they'll slam the trigger to the rear. They'll do like a really quick jerk, and that's not good for long range shooting. The other thing, which is sort of weird, is they do this like pull that's really light, and they start to build pressure. When the gun fires, their finger pops off the trigger. And so we call it a spring finger, but that doesn't do any good to the shooter because all of that movement is happening in the firing process and the bullet leaving the barrel. So make sure when you're focusing on your fundamentals and you're focusing on practicing that you pull the trigger straight to the rear with a good, clean pull, click, and you hold it to the rear until the bullet leaves the barrel and hits the target, or until you actually intend to reach up and work the bolt. That's a really good practice to get into. And then also, just a side note, make sure your trigger finger is square to the trigger up and down, as well as across the face of it. And a lot of times done properly, it will leave a gap between your trigger finger and the actual stock itself. Something that we're seeing a lot of this year, and something that is causing a lot of problems for shooters to shoot correctly or shoot accurately, is flexing stocks. I might have ranted and raved a little bit about some of the different stocks that we do or don't use, and some of the fills that some of the stock manufacturers that are using, that are allowing the forearms to flex real easy. In essence, allowing, as you're building or pulling pressure, on the bipod, allowing that end cap or the end of the forearm to flex, and that does not help accuracy at all. But what we've noticed is that there's a lot of chassis out there coming online that are being made that look great. But when you reach down, you grab the barrel and you squeeze that in the end of the forearm, whether it's a tube that goes over the barrel or, it's free floating on top of it, you can pinch the two together rather easily. It's almost like a springboard. That has caused a lot of heartache here at the school for shooters because it's really hard to get good, consistent shots downrange and keep those flyers and keep that group super tight if the end is flexing and bowing. And you see them trying to level their gun up and the forearm is bending one way and the barrel is bending the other. That's how soft they're becoming. Now, we're really critical when we build on rifles here that there are stocks that we just won't build on because it takes away accuracy from the rifle and the potential shootability or shooting ability of the shooter using it. But it's still a problem here at the school. This past year, we've seen lots of chassis come through that have this. And we sort of pointed out and we show some techniques to try to deal with it to get the best out of it that you can. But when you're building up a rifle or you're putting one together, be very mindful of that. If you can reach down and easily pinch that barrel and stock together at the end, it's flexing too much. You want that to be nice and stiff. We did talk about the feet rolling on the bipods a little bit, but I just want to touch base on this one again. I like the bipod feet that don't turn or roll. So like if you take the Harris bench rest version, you push a spring and the feet come popping out, but you can actually take the feet themselves and turn them like they're a wheel. That's not good for shooters either. I actually don't like feet that turn. They make a set of set screws you can buy aftermarket to stop that from happening on Harris's. But I am grateful that a lot of the new bipods that are coming out on the line now don't allow the feet to turn under recoil, and I think that's great for us shooters. The magazine drops and chamber flags, this is a safety thing, and we'll continue on to talk about maybe some safety glasses and stuff like that, but Shooting is a very fun sport. We're all into it because we enjoy doing it, but we still have to be careful and mindful. And we remind the students, like this year, we issued chamber flags or coolers that will go in and blow the heat out of the suppressors while we're off the line. But make sure you drop your mag. It's easy if there's a round in that magazine to bump that bolt and it touches the back of that round, and it'll pop it forward and out and almost into your chamber. And you go to close the bolt to dry fire, or you think the gun's empty, you drop the magazine, you close the bolt, and there's a live round in the chamber. So I always tell everybody on the firing line here to make sure you just work the bolt a couple times, putting the guns away. Take your bolts out when you're traveling with them. Also, be careful that when you're taking a break on the line that you drop your mag and open your bolt and even put a chamber flag. And I think it's a couple $1 item, but it will help prevent that from happening, that you stick that chamber flag and it's not going in there. There's a round in there. And then safety glasses, of course, and just general safety in itself. We mandate safety glasses here, but I'm often amazed if we don't bring that subject up, if we leave it go till we get to the line and we bring safety glasses with us. But how many guys would opt to shoot without glasses on if they're not told that they have to? And I just throwing it out there. This is a personal thing. It's not shaming anybody or saying who's right or who's wrong, but accidents do happen and things can go wrong, even if it's the shooter beside you that you have no part or parcel in. I mean, you had no control of the situation where a muzzle brace is going to get blasted off the end of a rifle because somebody installed it wrong, or the guy had somebody. I could tell you a story of, we had a local shop here that drilled and tapped an older rifle to put on scope rings and bases. And when he drilled into the barrel, he drilled down into the actual chamber itself. And so he put the bases on, he put the scope on for the customer. When the customer pulled the trigger, the pressure blew the screw and everything up into the bell of the scope, and it blew the glass out of the scope, both forward and aft. This stuff happens, and if you're sitting beside that person, it happens. I mean, you only get one set of eyes. So I'm just a big fan of wearing a really good set of safety or shooting glasses while you're shooting, not because anything can't go wrong or does go wrong, but even if you're not directly involved in it and something bad happens, at least you've protected your eyes. And then the one thing that I always like to talk about here at the school, as far as fundamentals go, is I always say that practice makes permanent. It does not make perfect. And the reason I say that is when you're practicing your fundamentals, you're making these things permanent as part of things that you do or will automatically do. And in this area creeps in the bad habits of things that you're doing that you might not even know you're doing. But if you keep practicing them, they will become permanent. We see it here at the school where we're getting students, an issue that they might have fundamentally, and we're trying to correct them and get it all squared away, and they'll start doing really good. An hour later, you look over and they're doing exactly what they did that we just fixed. They fell right back into that bad habit that they were doing. And we'll go back and sort it out and get their mind wrapped around it again. And again, I always say shooters, they focus so much on what's in front of their eyes and in the target that they really do go brain dead from the neck down. And practice makes permanent. You've been practicing this bad habit for so long that you don't even know you're doing it. And I can tell you over the course of the 3-day school that we've seen many times we're going back and saying the same thing to the same student over and over and over again. And we're trying to come up with a way to have them mentally check this before they shoot, because it's so ingrained into their shooting that they have made it a permanent part of what they do when they fire a rifle. And it is one of the hardest things to undo. So you have to practice with absolute intention. You have to make this mental checklist that corrects that through the firing process. And then you've got to do that for, 100, 200, 500 times till you finally erase that bad habit and replace it with a good one. So I always like to say practice makes permanent, and that pendulum swings both ways for good habits and bad habits. And so be very mindful when you practice that you're doing things the right way. And if you've got a bad habit, work really hard to not let that creep back in, because it will, and you won't even know you're doing it. So there are some tips from the firing line for this year. It was a great year. It was a safe year. We had lots of students come through. It was absolutely fascinating, the experience levels that we get shooters that have never shot anything at distance before at all. It shot a 22 long rifle, at 100 yards. And by the end of day 2, we've got them out to 1,000 yards on their own. So we don't tell anybody what, the dope. We don't tell anybody the wind. As a matter of fact, I've made it a rule that I never tell anybody a wind correction when they're setting up. Now, while they're shooting, I'll give them corrections, and we really focused heavily on spotting this year, which I think was fantastic. So I try to help them there, but I really make the students do the work, and boy, does it pay dividends. I mean, many times we go up to the 1,000-yard line. Most of these shooters have never shot to this distance before, and they're having success right out of the gate without me saying anything. And I think that's a sign of just really, really good fundamentals and doing the work up front before you take the shot. We did focus heavily on spotting this year and trying to get shooters to understand how to spot, what to look for. And I've said this for years, that the best place to learn spotting isn't shooting your own rifle. It's actually spotting for another shooter. Because once you learn what you're looking for and how things are supposed to appear, like we're looking for trace all the time. Once you learn what that looks like, then being a self-spotter or spotting your own shots just becomes so much easier. And so this year was a great example of that we've had many students jump back from the spotting scope. Oh my gosh, I saw a trace. That was awesome. I've never seen that before. I've been shooting 20 years. I've never seen that. And then when they get on the gun, they know, what the rifle's supposed to do, how it's supposed to recoil, and what to look for with the impact and making corrections, and sometimes even trying to spot their own trace. So I always say that you're the best spotter that money can buy. So when you're shooting, you and your ability to spot is just priceless, and a great place to learn that art is by getting behind another shooter with a good quality spotting scope and watching and learning and watching and learning. That's just a fantastic way to do it. So we're going to keep pushing that for next year for our 2020 dates. Now for 2020, we do have our shooting school dates up and running. Registration is open. We've already received several registrations for our May class of 2020. So for you guys that signed up already, thank you so much. We are limiting the class to 8 shooters, and we are limiting the classes to 8. So we're going to have a total of 64 students that we'll allow to come through the shooting school for next year. The reason being is our business is growing, of course. We're building custom rifles, and we are custom rifle builders. And that takes a huge priority for us. I love the shooting school. I know there was a conversation internally to cut it to 5, but I sort of stood my ground and said, hey, this is one of my favorite things to do, to spend time with guys on the firing line and girls and share what we do and help them grow as shooters. So I think we can handle 8. Let's do, so we're doing 2 in May, 2 in June, 2 in July, and then we do 2 in the fall. So that'll be our classes for this year. The changes we did make for this year, which I'm really excited about, is we really are trying to encourage, anyone who purchases one of our custom rifles, of course, you can take delivery of it, come in, and we'll take you to the range, get it fitted, get you comfortable with the rifle, and we'll get it chronographed and try to get some working dope at least started and make the first experience with the rifle a great one. But we do want to encourage you to bring it to the school. So anyone who purchases a custom rifle, of course, we want to allow you to bring it to school. We don't want to make this an all-issued rifle school, whether or not you own one of our rifles. I think that's absolutely unfair. If you purchase one of our rifles, we would love for you to bring it and run it through the course, and you just learn everything you can about it. For those who aren't a customer yet, we still want to encourage you to attend our shooting school. And we've said this for years, and with 13 years of experience of doing it, we've never had a student use a school rifle and say that they regretted it or they didn't learn. Most say that it was the best idea or it was the best decision they could have made, because once you learn everything we're going to teach you, you can apply it to any rifle you ever shoot. It's not rifle specific. And the flip side of the coin is a lot of times the shooters limit their learning by the limits of their own equipment as they come to school. So we are going to allow students that have never, not purchased any of our rifles. This is a long-range shooting school, and we do want to help and teach. But we're going to do something really fair. It's going to be a $194 fee to come and use a school rifle. And so if you would like to attend our shooting school, we would love to have you. I think it's a nominal fee to come through and shoot a $9,000 custom rifle that you're going to learn as much, if not more, than your expectations would ever hold. And you're going to go home a better shooter. And then regardless of the rifle that you pick up, everything you learned at the school, from fundamentals to making dope to dialing and doing all of that's going to go home with you. So you're going to be a well-rounded shooter. You're only going to pay for the ammunition that you use. So the cost of the school rifle is $194, and you'll pay for the ammunition that you shoot at the end of the course. So if you only shoot 8 boxes, 9 boxes, 10 boxes, we're only going to charge you for the ammunition. So the only additional fee that we have is the additional charge for the actual ammunition that you fired while you were here. But the actual cost of the school rifle for you to attend the school is $194. The class itself is still going to be 3 days. It's taught at Seven Springs Mountain Resort. For those that don't know much about Seven Springs, it's a $7 million facility owned by the owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates. It is a world-class facility with tons to do, from zip lines to horseback riding, swimming pools, indoor bowling alleys, outdoor mountain biking, hiking. The area is beautiful to visit. We're blessed that we get to use their facility there to teach the teaching portions of the class, and so you can come through and get a private room, and your family can come to the resort and stay with you while you attend the school, turning your shooting school into a family vacation. They will have an absolute blast there. You're going to join them every evening for dinner. But if you're going to be away from home for 3 days attending a course, we would like, if you would like, to bring your family with you, and they can enjoy the many amenities there at the resort. Or if you would like, you can share a room with another student. If you come as a team or there's a couple coming together, you can share a room and split the cost, and that'll help offset some of the costs of the shooting school itself. So we're really excited about that. And the most really exciting thing that I'm excited about for next year is that it is going to be an all-suppressed line. And we've had so many muzzle brakes and different calibers and come through the school, and it's really caused it's just difficult. It's difficult for the instructors because we're wearing earplugs and electric muffs to try to double protect our ears, but still we'll turn the electric muffs on so we can hear people talk for the safety of the firing line. It's really miserable for some of the shooters because we do shoot prone. They're getting blasted constantly, and there are some really awful breaks out there that are just rough to shoot besides. So, we're stacking, we have coolers and shooters bags we're putting in between shooters to try to reduce some of the blast that's blasting around. And so we brought in, we have 8 suppressors here. So if you're shooting, one of our custom rifles, all of our rifles are threaded. If you don't own a suppressor, you can rent one of our suppressors here, and you're going to shoot for 3 days suppressed. For those that are coming through and using a school rifle, that $194 includes the rifle and suppressor. So you're going to come through and shoot a suppressed rifle through our shooting school and really get to experience what it's like. I think it's a fantastic way to enjoy shooting a suppressed rifle for 3 days and see what it's all about. If you don't own a suppressor and you're allowed to own one in your state, you will probably go home and order one right away. They're a fantastic tool for everything that we do here. So our registrations are open for 2020. For those that would like to attend our King of the Mountain that we do in August of 2020, you have to attend one of our shooting schools first. So sign up, get registered for one of our May, June, July classes, and then you can come to King of the Mountain. For those that are renting a school rifle, we do encourage you bring your own rifle to King of the Mountain, and we encourage you bring your own rifle to the moving target class that we teach in Swainsboro, Georgia. We do not supply rifles or rent rifles for those events. So if you come through and enjoy the course with us using one of the school rifles, you can go back and get your own rifle all set up. At that point, you can bring your own rifle to those other events. You do not have to rent a rifle, and they do not have to be one of ours. And I think that's a great way to put your hunting rifle, tactical rifle, whatever you're deciding to shoot, to the ultimate test. And really, at King of the Mountain, have a world-class experience on targets that you just can't make up. And then shooting movers again, fantastic event to come down and learn a fantastic skill set on shooting moving targets. So just throw that out there. You can bring your own rifles to those 2 events, but you got to attend the shooting school here first. You have to be an alumni, just so we know you're fundamentally sound and got a good idea on what we're supposed to be doing as far as shooters go. On the build side, just to give out a quick update, we are working really hard to try to keep inventory. So actions, the ACE system, the chambers, the barrels, we have them in stock. We're trying to keep an inventory so we can keep the build times down to 6 to 8 weeks on some calibers and 3 to 5 months on some of the others. Some of it really depends on the stock availability. We do have McMillan stocks constantly on order to try to keep that wait time down to supply the finished rifle. And we're working really hard to supply both the carbon fiber and the Krieger barrels. The carbon fibers will be more appropriate for a hunting rifle or a long-range tactical rifle in which you prefer to use the carbon barrel to offset some of the weight. And of course, the carbon fiber barrels are on all of our hunting rifles, which is a great way to come through as well. We've had a great experience shooting short-barreled rifles this year. 18.5 to 22 inches is awesome, even up to and including a 300 Win Mag. You don't really lose a lot of velocity, but the rigidity helps with the accuracy. For example, we had one of our instructors run an 18.5 inch 6.5 Creedmoor and missed a mile plate by about a foot on his first or second shot. So they'll get there. They're just requires just a little bit more dope on those short barrels, but make great hunting rifles. We had a gentleman shoot beside him at the 2-day event and come back and order a twin that such a light little rifle with a 3x18 Leupold on it, suppressed 18.5 inch rifle could shoot that good at all those targets, and a lot easier to carry around. Was pretty cool. So that was pretty awesome. So we'd like to thank everybody for joining us. This is our 35th episode. We're working really hard, trying not to miss any. We do have some plans on some great episodes coming up that try to pass off some really great information. We've got some more interviews that we're going to try to do with people inside the industry that might have some good pointers that they can pass on to you, the shooters. We really enjoy the support that we're getting, the feedback that you're leaving. Our website, if you'd like to check us out, is wolfprecision.net. And if you like and enjoy the podcast, please come over to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Leave us some feedback, give us a thumbs up or like us. We certainly do appreciate that and helps bring people to the podcast to listen. So I really do appreciate it. If you get the opportunity to do that, that would be a big thank you for me. So again, thank you for taking the time to join us. It's been a great year. We're off to the winter months and hunting season now. Shooting schools won't be coming around till next year. If you have any questions on any of the things that we're working on here, please feel free to give us a call here at the shop, and I'll gladly talk to you in any way that we can and help in any way that we can. But thank you for taking the time for joining us. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.